My guest is Omar Carmenates, Dr. Omar Carmenates. And I'm Omar. Thanks so much for spending this time with us tonight. I really, really appreciate you being here. I've got massive love and respect for you because it's not fair for me to call you one of my kids, but you kind of are because I got to teach you in drum corps and whatnot. So anyway, we'll get to that later. But welcome. And I wanted to start by you kind of just walking us through, who you are, your background, how you got from, the beginning to where we are now in your world, certainly through band and drum corps music, but in life in general.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you too, Howard. As someone who I've known for over 20 years now, it's weird calling you your Romanite teacher at one point. Like we've just sort of in weird ways grown up together. There's a plate from my wedding in my dining room that I see every day, and I see your signature up front when you signed it from being part of my wedding. So anyway, it's the history here is great, and I'm happy to be here. So yeah, a little bit about me. I am currently to use the hoity-toity term, I am the Charles Ezra Daniel Professor of Music at Furman University. I'm required by contract to say that every time. And so I've been teaching percussion at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina for 15 years now. It's been 15, man. Yeah.
Cannot comprehend that. Oh my god! I don't know. I was thinking like 7, 8.
No, it's been 15, and we are what's known as a SLAC, a small liberal arts college in the mountains of Greenville, South Carolina, and that's been the big part of my career since 2008. I have a wife who you know very well. We marched together in drum corps. Two great kids that are 15 and 13, and yeah, my pageantry history is sort of both parallel and opposite of what I do now. I'm currently a WGI judge. I am sort of a consultant at Carolina Crown this year for the first time, but going backwards from there, spent some time at the Cadets, at the Spirit of Atlanta, and many years with you at the Boston Crusaders from 2004 to 2010 on staff in various capacities.
Right.
And then I marched, in the years that you and your previous guest, Rich Viano, were discussing in 2001 and 2002. And prior to that, marched in the Magic of Orlando back in 97 and 98. So I've got a long history in the pageantry arts. I've been writing and judging and teaching in some aspects basically since I can remember, since I was 15.
Yeah, and you grew up in Orlando, right?
Yeah.
I knew you went to university.
Yep. Yeah, University High School right across from University of Central Florida on the same street.
Yep. Absolutely, yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it's extensive, and I think you've done the pageantry arts, but you're a percussionist. You're not, I know we joke through time about drummer versus percussionist, whatever it is, but you are a percussionist, and but have had a massive pageantry arts background. And with that, a lot of you were a student leader, and you work with student leaders, and you've led staffs as caption heads, and so you kind of done all angles of that. And one of the things I really wanted to focus on with you, because I've been blessed that I've been able to work with you in all capacities, consultant, director, to teacher, to everything. And I mean, let's start with the value of, being able to be a leader in an organization. I know there's a lot of cliches for it. I know there's 1,000 books for it. I know there's all that stuff out there. Yet, I mean, when you look at it as far as the grassroots of it, what type of opportunity, I guess, how did that affect your opportunities as you got older, and what you were able to take part of and what you were able to do from that standpoint?
Yeah, well, I can trace this back. I use this time in my life a lot. It was even before the Boston days. It was my senior year in high school. My band director at the time, who now teaches at the high school down the street from University, Timber Creek High School. My band director was Rhett Cox, And his very first year was my senior year in high school. And, we were just getting to know each other. And he tells me, like, I know you've got this drum corps background. You seem like a really solid person. I want to do indoor drumline. What about you writing the show? And as a senior in high school, to write for your own high school,
Wow.
And I was like, I was sort of too naive at the time to be scared. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And
Yeah.
ended up writing a show, our show, which we took to WGI, and we did okay. But that opportunity to lead in more ways than just sitting in the line, right, standing in the line, but to also like musically lead. It's a chance to learn. It's still a chance to learn. It's not just that you turn off your student hat, no, you're also in the leader hat. You're doing both at the same time, and it really accelerated my passion and my solidification of my passion for what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I think that was a pivotal event for me to say, I want to do this the rest of my life. I want to teach music, and I want to be in music. And that led to, we didn't have great competitive success that year, but what happened the next year was we brought on, we learned our lessons. We were like, okay, let's try this again. And went to WGI, and it got third place, in Scholastic A class.
I've known you, like you said, for well over 20 years, and I didn't even know that. That was,
Yeah.
By the way, your sound's a little bit like gurgly. I don't know if it's the mic you're on, or I know you're.
I'm gonna freeze for just a second. I'm gonna switch routers.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, right now I'm waiting for Omar to come back. I'm not Mr. Technology. I might be able to edit this part out. I might not. But we're just kind of hanging on while he switches router elements to reestablish this connection. Okay, and now we got you back. How's that?
Good. It should be. Hopefully, it's better. You just tell me.
Yeah, way better. Way
Okay.
better. No, so what I was saying was I didn't even know that about you, that you did that at the high school level like that. And what an opportunity at that age.
Yeah, and it was a chance. Like, it wasn't just that, oh yeah, I got to do this, but it was a learning experience. I got to learn through real world experience as a high school senior, which
Right.
a lot of my students now that want to be arrangers, or that are asking me like, hey, can we talk? They're just writing for a local high school they're working with. They ask like, what was the pit? What made you the arranger you are? And I'm like, it was that early at bat. It was like just getting that chance as a senior before, rather than my first show being when I was like 24 or something.
I think, Omar, that something that kids struggle with in some ways from a leadership standpoint is, like, I think it's harder, and I kind of mentioned this when I was talking with Rich the last episode. I think it's harder to be a peer leading peers than it even is being in an instructor or teacher role, because you're leading these people from the line, and then you're having lunch with them and you're hanging out with them, whether at the high school level or even at the drum corps level. And I don't know, you always kind of struck me as an old soul, even as a kid. You just were like, you came into the organization. I mean, when I met you were what, 19, 20 years old, or were, but you could have been 40. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I know you had that perspective, but what are your thoughts on that? Because I think people listening to this, especially students listening to this, when they're having to deal with that challenge, what is your best advice regarding that?
Think, if you're a student leader, think about it as if you're on the other end of that, as if you're the person that's not a student leader in the same section. When you're that person, it's very easy to tell when someone is not being genuine, right? And I think that's all we want in a leader. Even me in my work now, like I have a chair, I have a boss I report to, who is also a colleague and a friend. It's much easier. The relationship's always much better when there's no barrier, when there's no falsehood, in that connection. And so
Authenticity is what you're talking
yep, authenticity. And so it's really important that you're, as a student leader, that you don't all of a sudden feel like that you're someone you're not, and that you have to act a way that you're not built to. And I've, you blessed me with some leadership opportunities, and I've worked with student leaders since then. And I feel like the best thing that I learned in those positions, and the best advice I try to pass on, is like there are many, many, many different ways to lead, and they're different from what you see on TV. They're different from what you see on Sundays at NFL games or basketball games or whatever you're watching. And it's important to lead the way that feels most comfortable to you, because then when you're genuine, you can establish that genuine connection with your peers. And that's almost more important than any kind of like rah attitude you can have when it's actually time for you to do the leading.
100%, because you've got so much to do with the environment of the people you are leading, and
right.
The organization as a whole. I've taught leadership for decades, and that's kind of my sweet spot. I enjoy it a lot, whether it be in my band program, drum corps, whatever that is. And one of the things I really focus on them with student leaders is they're a conduit. Like they're a conduit from the membership to, like, say, a staff, whether it's drum corps, band, whatever. And they're also the conduit from the staff back to the membership. And like one of the things I love about working with you is, put it instructor aside, but even as a student leader, like your ability to be able to, in a grounded manner, translate both sides of the table, if you will. How did you acquire that? Because to me, that's such a huge attribute in being effective.
I wish I knew. I'm the joke I use with my students a lot is like I'm lazy, and what I mean by that is I try to find the simplest answer to things. And if that means just being straight ahead and being honest and just saying, hey, this is what this is. Hey, staff member Y said this to us. I think that means this. Everyone agrees. Cool, let's go. Rather than, like, I've never been a meeting person, like I'm more of a doer. Let's have a 10-minute meeting. Let's go if we have an hour, let's spend 10 minutes talking about it and 50 minutes doing it. And I think that's sort of like nose to the grindstone. Like let's work it out through, even if it's through trial and error. I think that's more important than, I don't know, than trying to like decipher what you think someone means. And so when you're having to act as a conduit between multiple different people, just really it's often the straightest, easiest path, the straightest, easiest answer. And that's what I've always found, is again, just being genuine and being like, I think this is what it means. Let's try it. Cool. And if it doesn't work, and maybe that's the other part of it, is like being okay with being wrong.
Right.
Like that didn't work. Let's try it another way. And I did that today. I tried something with a student for 10 minutes in a lesson, and it wasn't working out. I was like, I don't think this strategy's working. Let's try something else. And just being vulnerable like that. I think that's another important aspect to what you're talking about.
Yeah. We talk a lot about vulnerability, transparency, owning it. If you don't handle something the right way, I think a lot of times people in general, not just students, but people in general, are going to have more respect for you if you own, what do they call it? Like failing forward. As you're failing forward in a situation, being able to do that. Mm-hmm. I find in my experience with you, your groundedness in being able to handle even the most intense moments in a situation, we're like beyond reproach, to be honest with you, in a lot of ways. And I think what I want to ask you about is perspective. When it comes to perspective, whether it's in leadership or just in functionality, how do you keep the most grounded perspective sometimes in really intense situations?
That's another one I wish I had it, because like every situation like that you mentioned is unique and requires a different solution. So I have a hard time applying like a blanket policy to things like that, you know. But when my thing has always been like when things are really tense, or when you know something's about to be tense, you know, like, oh, in 2 days I have to have this conversation and I know it's going to go south, or I know it's a little topic that I have to talk about. You know, it's just remembering at all times that you're always talking to another human being, and start the conversation with acknowledging what we're here to talk about, or what the discussion is, or what you're trying to work out, and saying, how can we work through this? Here's what I think, here's what you think, and keeping that like really respectful but really genuine face on, you know, like, it's not a face, it's not something you'd put on, you know, but it's just that it's your real person, you know, being there and acknowledging the human side of a tense situation. I mean, I have these conversations all the time, and when you just think of them, when you think of the person across from you as just someone that is trying their best, even if they're not meeting if you're the leader, if this person isn't quite meeting what you need them to do, you know, acknowledging that person's personhood, and that they're trying their best, and let's work towards a solution. I found that often works more effectively than the other way around, which is acknowledging the problem before the person.
Yeah, exactly. Human approach. I'm gonna edit this part out, but your thing is back to again. It was really good, and then all of a sudden, like 10-15 seconds ago, went back to gurgling elements.
I am so sorry. This is why I wanted to be in my office.
I'm sorry, Omar.
Sometimes my kids, you know, they're on their devices and doing whatever.
Bumped you off. Are you able to fix it again?
I can. Let me try another one, and then you tell me if it gets
All
better.
right. What do we got now?
We'll see.
Okay. Right now, you're good. Sorry. It's all right. It's all good. I'm going to figure out how to edit these parts out. Okay. Yeah. The next thing I wanted to ask you about is opportunity. And this is kind of leadership, but it's just opportunity in general, because I feel like, you know, you kind of like talk through your back, you know, and with me, because I knew you so young, I think of you young forward, right? And I feel like, I mean, you know, right, there's networking, there's being at the right place at the right time, there's using your connections properly and everything. But from the same standpoint, like, I feel like you're one of the people I've been able to work with in my lifetime that's really maximized their opportunities at the highest level. How did you go about doing that? Like, how have you, you know, I feel like, and I know you pretty well, you know, like you said, I've known you since you're a kid. Like, you're doing what you want to do, you know, your passion. And like, a lot of people would love to be able to do that with their life. And there's a path to that. Talk us through a little bit how you got to where you are by maximizing opportunity through time. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, totally. It's like that equation about luck, right? It's like where opportunity and preparation meet.
Yes. 100%.
And so for me, it was just early on, like right around the time I met you, and right around when I was you know, senior in high school, undergraduate age. I say it sometimes regrettably, but in a way, I'm happy that I did everything. I said no to nothing, to a point where it was like not benefiting my health that much. I wasn't sleeping that great. That's what I look back on and regret, that there was a self-care element to my youth that I think all of us would like to have back. But I was, you know, on most weeknights, I was playing at Disney after school professionally, through an audition I just happened to fall into as a senior in high school. I was any other night I wasn't doing that. I was gigging with, I was playing xylophone in a cartoon band. I said yes to every gig. And what that taught me early on was how to get good enough fast, you know, how to be ready for any opportunity. So when it came around, even if you weren't 100% ready, you felt confident enough in saying yes and then figuring it out as you went. But that only lasted me so long. So in my early 20s, I had this like real big, broad experience through whatever luck, one opportunity leading into another. I got to do a lot of things. But then I got into graduate school and I had teachers that called me out for not being prepared at the absolute highest level. Credit to John Parks at Florida State, who said to me, like, I remember my very first audition for the ensembles at Florida State, I was next to last out of the whole studio. Like, I lost a freshman. And it hurt, but it like him showing me what preparation felt like, what real, true professional preparation felt like, was the exact balance I needed to the broad, say yes to everything, do everything approach. And he taught me how to be excellent at one thing, how to be not one thing at a time, I should say.
Right.
And when you get really good at something, you actually start to not accept anything less than that in other parts of your life. It teaches you how to be a better father, how to be a better friend, how to be a better husband, how to be a better percussionist, how to be a better, once you've cracked the code, to excellence. And then from there, it's just a game of time management and making sure that you hold yourself to the standard you've set out for yourself, so that you are ready for the gig, whatever it may be, and being ready to be vulnerable and make mistakes, but never make the same mistake twice. That's the other thing. I'm happy to list the millions of mistakes I've made, but I don't think I've ever really made them twice in a professional setting. You learn from it, you move on, you grow, and that constant growth mindset for me is what's kept me moving, I think, in my career.
Right.
Being able and willing to change and not ever accept that what I'm doing is the way it should be. I change the way I teach every year just a little bit. I change the way I play every year just a little bit. And that little bit of evolution of change over time just really adds up over the years. And that's the other thing, is you just need years at it.
Well, it's a mindset thing, right? I mean, you're a collegiate instructor, a teacher, a professor, teacher, and like when we think of those people we had growing up, like a John Parks, like he's a master, right? They were continuing to grow. They're still continuing to grow as people and as educators. They're learning based. I think that's what you're talking about, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Like you're reinventing constantly, and being learning based is huge from that standpoint, because we've all, not saying any names, we've had teachers that this is who they are, this is what they are, and they're just stuck there, and they do that way in 2000, 2010, 2020, what that is, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And to bring it back to sort of like, I guess your fan base here, in the pageantry arts where it's competitive, you have to evolve. Like what was in fad in like 2002, like as great as that show was for us, I don't know how we would do now. It's a classic for sure. But the activity changes because there's this churn and burn in the activity where things just evolve so fast.
Well, I think the other most profound thing you just said in those last few minutes is, in fact, I've got a book over here. This is called The One Thing. It's my it's my real estate world. But the other profound thing you said is, you said being really good, getting really strong at one thing at a time. Because I think we're all guilty of trying to be, master of a million different things, and we get spread out and thinned out and everything else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I said, I'm thankful now for that broad base, that I can sit in a salsa band, that I can play drum set with a jazz combo, that I can play solo marimba, that I can teach in most settings, but all of that would be sort of like, up till I had my time with John, I was not great at any of that. And then once you learn to crack the code of how to get good at something, how to excel at something, you start to realize how you can do that in those other areas where you maybe don't feel so strong in, and your whole game just ups because of that. And once I learned that rising tide raises all ships, kind of thing, and applying that metaphor to my life, it really helped me just you know, raised the bar. And that's what I thank, and I'm so thankful for the privilege I have a job in music that pays the bills and all those things. But I think it was a combination of those two factors, having that broad experience, but that's nothing without the, you know, being great at something and learning how to apply those lessons learned to the rest of your life, or vice versa. Like, you can be great at one thing, but if that's the only thing you're good at, and at least in this business, it's like really hard, in percussion especially, to make a living if all you can do is play solo marimba. You've got to be able to do other things.
Yeah, versatility is huge.
Yep.
If you know, they say hindsight's 20/20, right? So like, you have a lot of perspective at your age now that you didn't have 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. And if there was anything, whether it be from a leadership, you know, or otherwise, is there anything professionally you would have done differently if you had the opportunity to do it over again?
Yeah. You know, again, going back to the pageantry arts sort of side of things, it's very easy in that world to get caught up in the competition and the competitive aspects of it. And as much as I say this to my students and to people I'm mentoring and even to myself, it's crazy how every year I look back, the best years I had the best seasons I had in that activity were the ones where I cared the least about winning, and where I just let the relationships I had and the collaborations that were in place flow as freely as they could, and to give as many people voice in the room as we could. Right. The years, I'm happy to call one out. It was my first year at the Cadets in 2017. You know, I was like, oh, this is the one where I'm going to win drums finally, you know, and I went into it like, we got to win. We got to win. We got to win. And here, that wasn't that long ago. And I had a lot of lessons to learn then, you know, and then the next year I went back to sort of my person first approach with the students and with the approach of design and collaboration. And in my little pocket of the world in the front ensemble, it went a whole lot better, to not much different competitive success, to be honest with you. We're better. Maybe placement wise we weren't, but I walked away from that season feeling a whole lot better. And
it's so funny that you bring that up, because you were talking about how Rich and I were talking about the 01-02 thing. And if you're listening to this episode, it won't make much sense to you unless you listen to the one before this, but you'll get what I'm saying. But that's a perfect example of that. In 01, which of course was your first year with us in the organization, it was all about the competitive element, because we had done so well the year before, had such leaps, and then there was this high expectation over the whole organization, which, you know me well enough to know if there's anything I could live over, would be that particular season, because you know, I put it all on my shoulders, Omar. It's like I don't care what anybody says, I'll take the blame for whatever didn't go as well as it should have. Even though when you look at that performance ensemble now, it's not as rough as I remember.
No, it's pretty good.
Damn good drum corps, right? So from that standpoint, but then when we went to the next year, where you know what? Let's just have a great time. Let's make a great show. Let's have a great experience. And that was one of my best seasons, teaching, marching, anything in the activity. I'll put that on the top of that experience, because every one of us, I can't speak for the organization, but pretty much everybody that got on the plane after that night felt really, like, I always use my, after quarterfinals, I could have taken the core away without them even knowing where we were sitting, and they would still feel great about what we did, and all the way for the rest of that week. So I can definitely understand what you're saying from that standpoint.
No, yeah, and to your credit, Howard, I still have a vivid memory in 2001, Erie, Pennsylvania, maybe, like near the end. Like, you said exactly what you just said. Like, you took ownership of the year, and you're like, we're going to make it as good as we can. I'm sorry this didn't turn out to be the year, you know, that was last year competitively, but I still believe in us and this, you know, you were real. And that made me want to run, you know, break down a wall for you, you know, and what's funny is I don't even know if you remember this, but I remember after finals, I'm not trying to blow smoke, I promise. This is just a very vivid memory. I had said to you know, you had hugged me afterwards, and you said, you know, you said something to the effect of like, you know, I'm sorry this didn't quite work out. And I said, Howard, my last drum corps experience, I was 13th. This was a success to me. I was happy to be there on Saturday, you know, and I'd imagine there were a number of students in that drum corps that felt the same way.
100%. Yeah, no, no,
Yeah,
100%. But again, it's kind of like we talked about in the beginning of this conversation, right? It's all perspective.
it's
It's
perspective.
it's all perspective, and yeah, I don't know if I'm actually working with the Boston Crusaders
Yeah.
again,
Hmm.
leadership capacity, and just loving every second of it. And that's a great perspective to me for how with these kids who are really close to winning the activity, and always because of the excellence in who they are. Yet they still have the same experience, the same background. They come with the same thing everybody did. They're great kids, great performers, but they're still kids. They only have so much exposure. So
Hmm.
I do the best I can to assimilate all that time of all the different ensembles and experiences, and share that with them in ways so that I can give them perspective to be able to, appreciate not only what they've got, but be able to maximize who they can be.
Yeah.
And you said it best, right? Like when you talked about the competitive balance versus the experience balance. I think that's something that almost and that's sports, that's, anything in life. I think there's a precious balance where that's concerned.
Yeah. And being a judge now for so many years has given me a really valuable perspective, because the shows that like make me want to give it up to them are the ones where I feel the human connection, not the ones that necessarily like check all the boxes
Right.
and do all the things and say and do all the right things. But it's like, wow, that felt genuine. And, as much as we have rubrics and things that as judges we work with, um, there's, it's still a musical activity. And in music, we value that connection. And, it's that part of it that gets the rise out of us. And those are the ensembles that you never forget, whether
Right.
you were in it or you were judging it or you were in the audience. um, it's the ones who was like that. Those were real human beings, really emoting in real time for however many minutes on a football field or a gym floor or whatever.
Right.
Um, and not the ones that were sort of doing the thing that was prescribed to them, and they were just doing, what I mean? Like they were just executing a job.
Yeah. No, I hear exactly what you're
Yeah.
saying. So with your students now, like your studio students and
Mhm.
people teaching today, um, the ones that are having the best success at like forward motion and growth, what are you seeing common across the board with those students?
Mhm. That they went on a path that was genuine to their talents and their personhood. you know it's really dangerous in our world to think that every single one of these students I'm thinking of in their early on in their time with me said, I want to do what you did. And I was like, no, you don't. First off, you don't want to go the path I did to get here. It was there was too much dumb luck involved. um but the other thing I tell them is like, you're not me. I'm not the kind of teacher, and I don't run the kind of percussion studio where the and there's nothing against this at all, but it's where I don't teach in a way where I expect the students to come out like versions of me. Like I almost take it as a I don't know, I almost take it as a negative when people say, oh man, these students, they play just like you, I see you in them. I was like, no, you need to see them in them.
Right.
And so for me, it's the what I take pleasure in is that there are students that took gap years between Furman and whatever was next for them. There are students that went to a different field altogether and then came back around or didn't. There are students that went into audio engineering and didn't go into music performance. There are students that went into science. There are students that did other things. It's one of the benefits of being at a liberal arts college is you have these open-minded students.
Right.
And I'm not pressured at all by my institution to like churn out orchestral musicians or anything like that, or one like to have one type of success defined as what defines my success.
Right.
And so I just see students going on in ways that is vastly different from what I did, and the fact that they felt enabled to take that risk after Furman is the biggest compliment to me. That they're willing to go study with a teacher that maybe is nowhere in my musical universe, or they're willing to go into a field that I know very little about, but they are passionate about. If I wanted these students to come out like me, I would have been like, no, you have to go to these schools that I went to because those teachers will get you jobs. But
Right.
that doesn't even get jobs anymore. You have to be you have to bring something new to the table. And so those are the students, and I'm happy to say it's pretty much all of them that right now just seem to be doing what they love,
Yeah.
and seem to have found themselves in a way that isn't just what I was as their teacher, but is they've discovered what they are for themselves.
Yeah, love that. I love that. So, Omar, if someone wanted to find you or find out more with you, how does someone find you? Website from
Yeah. So there's obviously I'm on all the social media things. Just search my name. There aren't that many people with my name. um, and then, and then there's obviously the Furman University website. That's usually the easiest way to reach me. Hope to have my own personal website in about a year or so, but that's still to come.
We'll get that going. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's social media for me is where I'm falling into contact with people mostly.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you spending the time with us.
Of course.
I appreciate you taking the time with me. I love and respect you more than I could ever imagine, and your wife.
Yeah, likewise.
And I hope that everybody on here tonight learned something and enjoyed spending the time with us. This is the Leadership Ladder. This is Omar Carmenates, and thank you for being with us. Thanks, Omar.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Howard.